Caitlin, thank you for taking the time today to have this chat and for coming on the podcast. And just to get things started, do you mind introducing yourself and what you're involved with?
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. So I am, I guess, a rogue scientist in a way. My background's in neurobiology, and my biggest sort of overarching passion is helping support people in their quest for finding health and wellness, specifically around mental health. And that's kind of taken me a lot of different directions. One, into the supplement industry, developing my own nutritional aids to help support people in recalibrating the nervous system and finding happiness and balance. And I also do quite a bit of psychedelic advocacy work and research. I speak a lot at events on psychedelics, on their effects and potential as a medicine for autoimmune conditions and trauma and inflammatory conditions. And I'm also a Kambo practitioner, which I'm not sure if anyone has heard of that, but it's basically an Amazonian frog medicine that comes from the secretion from a skin of a very specific type of tree frog. And it is used as a spiritual and medicinal ritual by various Amazonian peoples. So I kind of got my toes in a lot of different obscure, strange things, but really the grand theme is just trying to find ways to support others in their journey to wellness and joy.
And what initially brought you down that path or sparked an interest in getting into that field?
Yeah, well, I think like a lot of other people, I struggled with depression and anxiety. And, it's kind of an interesting synergy of how I got interested in all of these things, but very much a personal story. When I was in my undergraduate, getting my degree in neurobiology, I was using a lot of psychedelics and going to festivals, Burning Man, or exploring consciousness, drinking ayahuasca. And when I was in sort of my last year of school, the classes were quite difficult. It was like organic chemistry and biochemistry and all sorts of calculus and stuff. So I sort of took a break from partying, thus psychedelic use, and I was just going to buckle down and focus on school. And an interesting sort of pattern that I found was that around the 7th to 8th week after my last LSD experience, my brain chemistry would start to kind of slowly unravel. Like I would become increasingly anxious, irritable, unsettled, and depressed, even though there was circumstantially nothing really changing. And it has happened about 3 or 4 times, like around that 7th to 8th week after my last experience. And what I had kind of discovered was that I had depression and anxiety with, some sort of physiological, origin. And I had been actually medicating with psychedelics. And once I realized that, I was like, okay, well, that's cool. But what's causing this in the first place? And that is really where my obsession with the role of nutrition and nutrients and the botanical effects on things like depression and anxiety came into play. And I just spiraled down a rabbit hole into the scientific literature, looking at mood disorders and mental illnesses and how crucial nutrients are for really fundamental biochemical processes of making neurotransmitters, of repairing and growing new dendrites and synaptic spines, and just really fundamental basic neurological health. So that prompted me to start my company, which, I also have a lot of sort of psychedelic synergy with, the work I do in promoting the nutritional piece, lifestyle piece, and also just overall, mind, body, spirit healing.
Mm-hmm. And what was the first product that you had launched under your supplement line?
Well, it's actually a product that we no longer have. It was quite an evolution to get to where we are now. Originally, I launched the company with a party recovery product, and it was called Revive. And I was so afraid of labeling it as party recovery that I didn't really say what it was for, and it was kind of vague, and nobody really knew what the heck it was for. And so then I actually took that product and repackaged it into tiny little packets that had like a weekend supply of these party recovery pills, and then I changed the name to Weekend Warrior. That product is discontinued and also just kind of, we're getting rid of whatever's left of the inventory because what we discovered was that it's quite a niche group of people that are forethinking enough to know they're going to take drugs and party and feel tired and buy the supplements ahead of time. It just wasn't a business model that was working. And we realized that the market for people that really need mood and stress support was a lot bigger and really kind of more aligned with what I was passionate about anyways. So that's the direction that we went. And that has really been a good direction for us to go because there's a lot of people that need help.
Mm-hmm. And was that where Transcend came into play after that?
Absolutely. Yeah, Transcend was really the mood and stress support product that we launched with that had a very clear use for people. It wasn't vague about what it was for. People knew what it was for. And I do think that, developing the other products was essential in leading to the evolution of Transcend, getting feedback from people, diving deeper into the neuroscience literature and fine-tuning and tweaking formulations and the manufacturing process.
Mm-hmm. And so what brought you to that formulation did you start with that, or was it like a process of like, take out this, put in this, and like, how did that overall process unfold for you in terms of formulating the actual blend?
Yeah, it was something that kind of, unfolded in a matter of years. The original product that was for the party recovery was not that different from the Transcend. It was kind of just like a 1.0 version. And really, it was a collection of years of reading a lot of scientific literature and doing a lot of self-experimentation with all these different agents on their own to kind of get a feel for each of them uniquely. They're like their individual essence of each molecule, each plant, and then half formulated with sort of an intellectual analysis of the scientific literature, and then the other half was based somewhat on intuition based on my personal experiences with these compounds, and then formulating them in a way that felt really balanced but was also backed by the scientific literature, and creating a product that doesn't push anyone too far one direction or the other, but rather supports the body's natural ability to rebalance and to reinitiate homeostatic, centeredness.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think it is that is the driving force or driving factor of the fact that, people are wanting this type of supplement? Like, how do you think this, because I do think the market is getting bigger and bigger, people that are experiencing these symptoms of depression, anxiety, and, all sorts of different stuff. I've talked with a few different people on this podcast about it, but I want to get your opinion. What is your opinion on why you think people are experiencing these bouts of depression or having, I think it's from external stimuli, but it also, I'm sure, comes from within their own self, their diets, exercise levels, whatnot. But I also think it's due to the overwhelming information that's in our society right now. Some other people on the podcast have discussed phytoestrogens and things like that are affecting our hormones and everything. But I do want to get your take on it, like why you think that market is just booming so much. I would say even in the past 5 years, it's just gotten so big and it's continuing to expand.
Yeah, well, certainly the supplement industry is growing in general, and I think that is for a variety of reasons. One, I think we are starting to see people's bodies fall apart for various reasons. Their mental bandwidth is falling apart. And yeah, I think there's a lot of sort of chemical agents to blame, such as, very neurotoxic pesticides and endocrine disruptors and overuse of antibiotics and, lack of, effective minerals in the soil to create healthy, nutritious food. There's a whole bunch of toxic assaults that our body is dealing with on a regular basis. You know, the sort of loss of biodiversity in our microbiome, you know, the bacteria in our guts. So there's definitely, you know, a physiological piece, but also, you know, the world is moving in a direction, especially, you know, if you look at the sort of ecological impact of things like climate change. I think that's raising a lot of feelings of insecurity and unsettledness in people as well. We've also really lost a personal connection or a sense of tribalism where we feel socially supported. You know, everybody is now interacting socially via technology like social media or cell phones, and it's kind of eroding the natural social support systems that we co-evolved with to feel safe, to feel supported, to be able to thrive. So I think it's quite multifactorial why people are feeling more depressed, more stressed. You know, we also live in a digital age where there's a lot of information that we're inundated with at once, and we are constantly overstimulated, and our nervous systems really aren't designed to be stimulated that regularly and to have zero downtime, or to, you know, work 12 hours a day and to not sleep, and to take, you know, your coffee in the morning and then your antidepressants and have a beer at night. So just our whole lifestyle and our whole culture has really diverged away from what our biology is evolved to cope and thrive with. So I think that's why we're seeing a lot of depression and anxiety and mental illnesses skyrocket. And I think also the reason that the supplement industry is growing is that as we have these more chronic and difficult to treat problems erupt at epidemic levels in the population, we're finding that, you know, conventional medicine has a lot of limitations in being able to help people. And people that are, you know, desperate, they're looking outside of conventional medications because they've tried that and they're not working. So I think a growing distrust in conventional Western medical treatments and approaches is sending people towards the supplement industry in general. So I think, like I said, multifactorial reasons why we're moving towards supplements.
Mm-hmm. I do notice that as well. People are starting to distrust the medical system as it's become, it seems to just be prescription based with like an average of like under a minute or some crazy number that a patient will see a doctor before just getting prescribed and then shuffled out of the room. So I do feel a lot of people are going in the direction of like holistic remedies and whatnot, even in terms of just looking at the sheer, because I'm in a technological digital marketing space, but looking at the sheer volume of search and stuff, it seems to just be on the incline for holistic remedies, holistic treatments to, you know, all sorts of different diseases and illnesses. So I think you're in a really good space, and I think it's like a space that is growing rapidly. How many supplements have you launched under your line?
Well, we actively have 2 products at the moment, but if you include the sort of, you know, practice products, we've launched a total of 4. But really, yeah, we have 2 that we're, you know, actively manufacturing and selling. And we are in the process of expanding our line. You know, sleep, I think, is going to be our next target because sleep is also a really challenging topic for people. And if you're not sleeping well, you really can't have optimal brain function and mood. And, you know, there's all sorts of directions that we see going, but we are a 2-person company. So it's a slow process of, like, you know, handling one new product at a time. We're not like some multi-million-dollar company that can just launch, you know, 100 products, you know, without even blinking. It's quite expensive to create a custom formulation, actually. It's like, you know, really like probably $20,000 just for the minimum quantity to even start. And then, you know, then you have to sell it, which is a whole nother challenge. So.
Mm-hmm. I noticed the pricing on your product is actually pretty reasonable as well when I consider the actual ingredients in it. And when I compare with a lot of other different products out there that are basically advertising a similar type of, I guess it's in a similar market or similar, targeting similar demographic. But I did notice that your pricing is pretty fair. one thing about, and I guess it's just a little side note, because I know we did that video recently, and I'll put the link to that video that I reviewed your products in the description here. But I wanted to know if you've implemented any affiliate program for that product. I think we briefly talked about it before, but in terms of like getting it out there and getting it sold, I think it's like one of the most effective ways to do so. Just giving people a good affiliate commission and just letting people in that sort of healing, wellness, holistic health space just kind of promote your product for you. So have you created any programs like that yet for your products?
We've definitely dabbled in it. One of the issues that, you also pointed out is that the margin's really not there. We really, in an effort to make the product affordable, we have grossly undersold it really. It's quite.
Sorry, I don't interrupt here, but it's like if you guys increased your pricing just a bit,
Yeah.
yourself that room that you'd have affiliates then be able to do your marketing for you. So it's like, I just think it's something you could consider. I just work with a lot of different brands and a lot of different companies on my like 9-to-5 type of job. And I find that like a little tweak like that could set you off in a really good direction. Also, some brands I work with on like creating YouTube promos and whatnot, a lot of like CBD companies nowadays, they have huge margins. And I know affiliates are a huge driving factor of their sales. Like it's kind of one of those things where if you align yourself to even a handful of affiliates, they could pretty much drive your revenue, and then anything you produce on top of that is just like icing on the cake. So just something if you guys did, I know it's like a kind of a big thought to take on right now to adjust your pricing, but I did notice it was kind of lower than I thought it would be for the what's included in it.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
increase it in, it wouldn't be that outrageous,
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and that is on our radar. The only challenge with that has been currently the majority of our revenue is from Amazon. And people that shop on Amazon, they want the cheap stuff. And so what we found is when we do raise the prices on Amazon, our sales drop. And right now the cash flow from our Amazon sales is what's moving the company forward. So in the future, we're probably going to creep up our prices just so that this can be a sustainable business for us. But right now, we don't want to pull the plug on, our bread and butter as of yet until we feel like we have enough sales so that we can afford to lose the people that don't value the product at what it really should be sold as. So yeah, it's a process. We just have to be strategic about not gutting our own throat.
Yeah, it almost maybe even you would create a new supplement that's geared towards marketing with affiliates, and then you can start
or just relabeling the same formulation.
Yeah, that too.
yeah, we're already on it, trust me.
All right, so getting a little bit away from that, I did want to talk about MAPS, because you mentioned it earlier, and I know that you had gone to a conference. Do you go to conferences a lot relating to neuroscience, and do you have a lot to do with MAPS or involvement with them?
Yeah, I do work with them on occasion. I mean, really just kind of in the psychedelic community and research community in general. I have a lot of affiliations with everybody, and I do present at psychedelic conferences quite a bit. Lately I've been talking a lot about the implications of psychedelics for autoimmune conditions and the evidence that they could be really effective interventions for that whole category of diseases.
That's pretty neat. Yeah, I've spoken with a few people about autoimmune, and I take different mushrooms, not psychedelic mushrooms. I never really thought about psychedelics as a treatment for autoimmune, but it's interesting. But I take different mushrooms like lion's mane, Cordyceps militaris, Chaga reparishi, and I find those help with like autoimmune, just building that immune system support. Has that been something you've considered creating a supplement around, like those type of ingredients like lion's mane? I've actually made a YouTube video on lion's mane. I can't remember how many views it's at. It's got to be like 50K or more now, but it's pretty popular, like those mushroom blends.
Yeah, I've definitely considered it. To be honest, I haven't dabbled a lot with the medicinal mushrooms because I actually have quite a hypervigilance against any sort of fungal organism. So my body is highly reactive to mushrooms, yeast, mold, fungus. And I've found that a lot of people that are chronically ill or have autoimmune conditions, perhaps like a candida or yeast overgrowth or some sort of fungal organism that's kind of ran rampant, they also tend to have sensitivity to mushrooms and fungal sort of ingredients. So I haven't really dove down that path yet, mostly just because I haven't personally felt safe to investigate all those mushrooms. But yeah, eventually that's something that I could see us doing. But like I said, it's kind of a big process to launch each new product. So I'm starting with what I feel like I know really well and can actually experiment with my own body first, just to feel solid about the formulation.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. So now when you do speak for at different conferences and whatnot for MAPS, what are you typically covering? Like what topics are you going over? I mean, I know you mentioned autoimmune, but what else do you typically go through?
That's mainly what I've been focusing on lately. But that's kind of like a larger sort of topic. I talk about the immune modulating properties of psychedelics via their binding to the serotonergic system, and how the serotonergic system does modulate all these immune processes in different tissues of the body. I also talk about, their potential effects on the microbiome, which is, dramatically involved with autoimmunity and chronic inflammatory illnesses. And also the role of psychedelics in helping resolve and unwinding trauma and the resulting autonomic nervous system dysfunction that happens after, childhood trauma. That really, I found that the trauma is usually the core of why the person developed the chronic or autoimmune illness in the first place. And also the anti-inflammatory effects of psychedelics. It's very preliminary research, but there's a lot of evidence that these are potent anti-inflammatory agents, which can help mitigate the chronic inflammation that people with autoimmunity are experiencing, and that can actually kind of viciously cycle into creating more damage and then more inflammation, and perpetuate this illness and this immune dysfunction in people.
And where do you think that trauma is held? Like, is it held in the mind of the individual, or is it more of a physiological type of thing?
I think for the most part, once it's manifesting as a physical illness, it is embedded in the body. It might occur in the mind originally, but having a chronically stressful experience, or even just like a dramatically stressful experience, the nervous system holds that for a while. It holds you in this hypervigilant, sympathetic flight or fight state because it doesn't feel safe. It feels like it needs to stay alert and run from the tiger or defend itself or whatever. And when you're stuck in that sympathetic state for a long time, your body starts to really run out of resources, because you're not meant to be running from a tiger for years on end. It's when you're in this stress response, your body is taking all of its resources and investing it in this important, fleeing from the tiger, and it's willing to put the digestion on hold, the immune system, all these repair processes, stuff that's really only important for long-term, sustaining of an organism, gets put on hold when you're in a flight or fight situation, and it's grabbing, all the sugars, all the energy, all the resources from your body and pouring it into, making sure that your muscles can run really, really fast right now for the next 20 seconds. And we're not designed to be in a flight or fight for a long-term amount of time, and it's really not sustainable for our health. And so you start to see the body be compromised in other ways. For example, the digestion is shut down. You're not extracting nutrients from your food, which are fundamental to running the whole machine. You can't build a brick wall without bricks. And, your immune system gets shut down because, we're not worried about pathogens and infections that are going to happen, slowly in a week. We're worried about the tiger that we're running from. So you start to get organisms that can infect and overgrow or crowd out healthy bacteria in the body and create dysbiosis or imbalance of microbial populations. And then that contributes to autoimmunity or chronic inflammation or pain or more digestive issues. So those are just like examples of how this chronic stress can start to manifest in other parts of the body downstream, weeks, months, even years after the initial stressful experience. Because once you're compromised, it's really easy to just get out of whack and for it to escalate.
Mm-hmm. And I hear it's like, it's almost like we're always under attack from like bacteria and things like that, and our immune system naturally defends these things. But then when we get into those fight or flight states, it's like the stress hormone just shoots up, like we have a rising cortisol, and all of a sudden our immune system drops. It's like our firewall defense drops, and all of a sudden bacteria can start to attack us, and our natural defenses don't really take or do the job they should. So I think it's a pretty big epidemic, I'd say, in our current time. So what do you find that, have you heard of the recent decriminalization of the psilocybin mushrooms in a few different states, right?
Yeah, in Oakland and, Colorado, and I think the movement is popping up in a lot of other cities right now.
And what do you find that and this is, again, getting into mushrooms and fungi and stuff, but aside from that, other psychedelics as well, but what do you find is actually occurring in the brain? Because you hear a lot of things like it rewires your brain, or it helps like build new, repair synapses and whatnot. So what do you find is actually occurring in the brain that's allowing people to get out of that fight or flight?
Yeah, I actually read a really interesting paper on the role of two different serotonin receptors in mediating stress coping response in a human being, or perhaps it was rats, in mammals, and the implications for why psychedelics might provide this sort of novel way for overcoming a stressor. And it's really interesting. A lot of the sort of typical SSRIs or serotonergic drugs that target the 5-HT1A receptor, that receptor allows the body to kind of cope or tolerate with the stressor. So you're sort of mitigating and just, gritting your teeth at the stressor when that serotonin receptor is being utilized for overcoming stress. When you start hitting the 5-HT2A serotonergic receptor, which is what a lot of the classical psychedelics are known to bind the strongest to, it actually creates this different way of coping with the stressor that it propulses forward how do I phrase this? It allows you to come up with creative solutions to remove yourself from the environment of the stressor. Does that make sense? Like, to actually, rather than coping with it, like the 5-HT1A subtype would help you do, it actually provides you with the motivation and the intellectual flexibility to find a creative solution to what is causing the stressor in the environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm actually listening to an audiobook right now. It's called The Biology of Belief, and it touches on a lot of this stuff. And it basically says that even getting into the fight or flight reaction stress response, how it'll flow through the brain, it'll hit the, I don't know if it was the hypothalamus. I'm not sure. I'm not a neuroscientist, but basically it flows through there into the pineal gland, and the pineal gland will communicate with like 50 trillion cells of the body, and the cells of the body they react to their perceived environment. So it's like what you're saying kind of makes sense, because if you eliminate the environment, you change the environment, you change the circumstance, you can set yourself up to work around whatever problem or stressor you may be having. So if the psychedelics allows you to have that perception to do so, perception to change what you're perceiving,
yeah,
does make sense. Does make a lot of sense. I've had certain psychedelic experiences where I'll get those like intuitions, and it's like duh. It's like a duh moment. Like, oh shoot, there's that option or that resolution or this route I can take. So
yeah,
it was really interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah, it seems like it in some way returns agency and empowerment to the individual where they realize they don't have to sort of sink into the learned helplessness model of tolerating a stress and just numbing out and dealing with it. They can actually rise up, take take authority and be proactive about changing their situation, changing whatever's traumatizing them or keeping them stuck. And then there's also, you know, the neuroplasticity that we see. These compounds really promote the sprouting of new neurons, new dendrites, new synaptic cells, and they actually kind of provide opportunity for networks to rearrange themselves so you can disrupt these old grooves, this old patterning within the brain and nervous system and actually just kind of start something new. And I think that's another sort of fundamental piece to why they allow us to get unstuck and adopt new patternings in our life.
That's really cool. Yeah, like helping build new neural pathways that you can take.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really neat. So have you had any transformative psychedelic experiences outside of the what effect it may have had on your mind and how you came out of it, but any just major intuitions, or some people call it downloads and stuff like that, that you would have experienced during that time? Actually, I spoke with someone recently. He said he doesn't necessarily receive downloads in the sense of like going into, or when it comes to psychedelics, even meditation, but it's more just a heightened awareness that comes now once they move about the world in their normal day-to-day experience. So it's kind of like alluding to a bit what we just discussed, but have you had any major transformative experiences such as that? Downloads?
I've had a lot. Yeah, I've had a lot.
The first couple to come to mind that were really powerful for you.
Oh my God. Well, I've had hundreds of psychedelic experiences, so it's a little bit hard for me to pinpoint.
Yeah, they all kind of jumble up after a certain point of time. Yeah.
Yeah, they really start to melt together, and then, you know, like you were saying, like they really change how your mind operates in its waking, normal, sober state. And so the difference between how I am in sober, you know, versus in a psychedelic state, it's not as far of a leap as it used to be for me. You know, I guess they call that permafried, but I call it open. The door is open. Yeah, definitely have gotten some very specific downloads both during psychedelic experiences and then, you know, in this sort of semi-open, more mindful state that I kind of occupy in my daily life now. I've had, you know, some ayahuasca experiences where I actually just asked, I said, tell me what I need to know to like move the world of science forward. And she just was like, all right, boom, there you go. And gave me some very, very detailed, specific understanding of the physics of molecular memory and how things like neurotransmitters and proteins and small messenger molecules actually hold these large, infinite amounts of data, and that, you know, the molecules that make them up really hold a memory of every sort of existence that they've had in each different organism, each different lifetime, if that makes any sense. I mean, obviously I can't prove any of that, but it felt very true and it still feels very true to me. So there have been situations like that where I'm just getting this like spiritual biology lesson, which is really cool because I am a scientist by background, but I'm a highly spiritual being as well. And I really like to play with bridging the gap between those because I don't see them as separate. I see biology as this beautiful manifestation of God or greater consciousness or the universe or whatever you like to call it, which makes it fun to explore consciousness and spirituality and science because I feel like the more science I learn, the closer I am to you know, God or the ultimate consciousness or even my own spirit.
It's funny how, like, going back maybe a few decades, you'd think science be over here, spirituality be over here, but like it is coming to a point where it's like the gap is being bridged. I actually made a podcast episode. It was a solo cast where I attempted to do just that. I was like heavily into, I'll go through like bouts of really wanting to learn physics for like a year, and I'll just pound through physics books. So I actually made an episode where I discussed physics and string theory, and then I tried to bridge a gap in the understanding of that, and then going into like Indian and Vedic texts and things like that from spirituality and Hinduism. So I was trying to bring it all together because there is some similarities, and I think that it's just not too far apart. So it's kind of neat that you're a scientist, but you get involved in the sort of spiritual, metaphysical side of things as well. So I actually wanted to ask you about the Kambo, the frog poison. I have a friend of mine that does that every now and then. Is that the one where he gets it on his arm or something like that? Is that the one? Okay. So what's the experience out of that exactly? Because I know it's probably not the same as the DMT one, right? You smoke, but that's also from a frog. I don't know if it's from the same frog.
It's from a toad. Frog and toad are different.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Kambo is not a psychedelic experience. That's very important to make sure that people understand that. And it's currently legal and unscheduled. So it's made through superficial burns on the skin, usually on the arm, or you can get more fancy with different chakras, acupuncture meridians, or even the auricular ear points, depending on your practitioner, what they're trained to do. But yeah, it's quite a unique experience. I have to say, there's nothing else like it. And as a practitioner, I work with it a lot. And the longer I have a relationship with it, the more weird it is to me, honestly. Like, the weirder it gets, and the more I'm just like, okay, I guess some things you just don't have to understand to appreciate. But as far as the experience goes, it's very short. It's about a 20 to 30 minute experience of actually being in the medicine, and it's largely an uncomfortable purgative experience. Within about 30 seconds to a minute after the secretion is applied to your burns, it goes into the lymphatic system, and the effects come on quickly, and you can feel your heart start to beat, fuller and harder. You get like a hot flushing sensation in the body as if you've taken niacin. You might feel tingling sensations in the hands or different parts of the body. And then you get very nauseous and you vomit. That's part of the experience. And the idea is that you're purging physical and energetic toxicity that the medicine's pushing out of the body. And sometimes people have to, release by making a bowel movement or shaking or crying. I mean, it can kind of look like a lot of different things. But it's not like a mind-altering experience. People are totally coherent and able to communicate the whole time, and it is so short-lived, so they're not like driving anywhere while they're in the middle of their experience, so they're just there and safe until they're finished. And as quickly as it comes on, it is done. It's quite remarkable how fast you can go from feeling okay to feeling terrible to feeling good. And it does have this really bizarre metaphysical, spiritual piece to it that I really don't have like an explanation for how it works, but you really can feel that you're interacting with some intelligent force, and you feel this presence that is moving through your body and like doing all these things inside of you that you don't understand, but you can feel that there's a kindness and an intentionality to it. And it's actually the after effect, the sort of days, weeks, and months after the experience where you see the benefit unfold. It's like this internal process of dramatically changing your chemistry with all these peptides from the secretion creates this massive ripple through like space-time metaphysics, and you actually can see how your internal process is altering your external environment, which that's the part I really can't explain to you. It's like some quantum, effect, and I've seen it enough that I know that it's not just coincidence at this point. Like people's lives just like start to really shift and move around, all because this like chemical agent disrupts whatever weird patterning or grooves or trauma they're holding in the physical body. And there's this resulting sort of outward fluctuation of the matrix, So kind of weird.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. I mean, I've tried I've ingested 4-ACO DMT, which is it's like a chemical variation on DMT. It's made in a lab, and
Yeah.
that lasted, I don't know, it's like maybe a 10-hour high, peaking at around 4 hours until about the like 6th or 7th hour. So like a good 3 hours of just steady like out there. And I did have this sense of like connectivity within a matrix or a web of information or energy, which was really interesting. And then that sort of feeling of like an external experience then being manifest outwards, either through just me projecting out, or yeah, it sounds very similar actually to what you described there. Although the 10 hours is a lot longer than the 20 minutes.
Yeah, thank goodness this doesn't last for 10 hours. But yeah, I mean, I always tell people it's kind of like its own doorway. Like, psychedelics can open a doorway of consciousness. Maybe meditation opens its own doorway. And then Kambo is its own place. But it is mind expansive, I would say. Like, you do feel more mindful, and you're picking up more sensory data and intuition after experiencing the Kambo, but in a way that's different to a psychedelic experience. It really adds like another layer of dimension and depth to your perception in your waking state.
That's interesting. That might be something I try someday. A buddy of mine has been pitching it to me for a while, and I think it's been doing it for a couple of years now. So there's some ceremonies that he goes to in the city of Toronto. I just live on the outside of Toronto, so one day I might try it out. So touching on what you just mentioned, actually meditation, do you have any meditative practice or even something like yoga or anything like that you do?
Yeah, definitely. I just did yoga this morning, and I do have a meditation practice. I'm not gonna lie, it's not the most robust practice, but that's part of my process is, getting better and more disciplined at it. I've done like meditation retreats, like Vipassana style, and, experimented with a couple different types of meditation, like Zen and Transcendental and Vipassana style mindfulness meditation, which I found to be really helpful. And honestly, every person should have a meditation practice. Like, I can't think of any reason why someone shouldn't meditate, but it is hard, especially when you're in a keyed up state, to sit there and try to focus, on nothing, or, whatever the focus of your meditation is. It's really hard. And for me, I had to go away to a meditation retreat to even make that initial leap in creating a practice at all, because I had to put myself in an environment where there was nothing else for me to do. And I was just going to sit there and meditate all day, so that when I am sitting there and I'm like bored or like I can't focus, there's no out, there's nowhere for me to go. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be sitting here for the next 12 hours. I might as well at least try. So getting through the obstacle of just like not being able to focus or sit still, it's helpful if you put yourself in a retreat where there's nothing else to distract you and there's frankly nothing else to do. So you might as well sit there and do nothing, and eventually you'll meditate.
Yeah, I feel a similar way. I find that if I go out in nature, it's a lot easier for me. If I just go for walks, or if I go into like a forest or something like that, it comes so much more naturally than if I'm like trying to do it even at my home or, anywhere really, like anywhere where there's like electronics nearby. It makes it like
ding, ding.
constant ding. And even just the fact that like we're so programmed now to like instinctively pick up our devices. I think the average was like every 10 minutes someone checks their phone. For the average person, it is crazy. So it's very disruptive. I find that going out in nature is just really beneficial. So it's for you to say that to go to retreats. I've personally never gone to any. Initially, I lived like in the core of the city of Toronto, which was just like chaotic as hell. Like I was there for about almost 10 years. And then just like the parades and the thing and like all the craziness, all the people, I just was like, I need to get out of this. So now I'm just a little bit outside, like 20, 30 minutes, more immersed in nature. I'm actually selling my house right now. I'm going even further, a little bit east of the city to get more in nature, like a little bit more acreage, just because I find like you have to put yourself in that environment in order to really I mean, just because of so much technological devices, for me especially, like I have, like right now, I'm just looking at like 3 screens, 3 phones in front of me. Like normally I have a laptop here as well. Like it's just crazy and overwhelming. So just for anyone that's listening, I would recommend just getting out in nature if you do find it difficult to meditate. I kind of
Yeah.
like the same because I get the same way sometimes. Like I'll sit and I'll be like, shoot, all right, how long has it been? 5 minutes. Wow, okay.
Is this over yet? Can I
Yeah.
get back to working and checking my
It
email?
was just like that for me today. Like some days I'll wake up and I'm like, yes, I feel great, and I can just go for like a half an hour, and I'll have some really great. It's like I'll do transcendental meditation, or I'll do more of a Zen practice, which I prefer in nature. I'll just go sit somewhere. I'll just do sky gazing. I actually had Lama Surya Das on here, who's a Dzogchen tradition, Tibetan Buddhist type of Lama. And we were talking about it, sky gazing, something really simple. You just lay down and you stare at the sky and just get lost in the I refer to as the homogeneous nature of the sky, and that we are a part of that same energy. And it's like when I'm on the psychedelics, I realize that I feel it like deep in my core. And then when I'm not, it's like I just look up on like, oh, sky, birds, clouds. You know, it's like the mind just identifies these objects and then loses
Yeah.
the whole concept of how it's homogenized with everything else. So I don't know how I got there, but it's a tangent. But that's cool. You do have meditative practice. So getting back to your supplement company, I just wanted to know how you came up with that name. It's Entheozen? Is that correct?
Entheogen. Yeah. So it's based off the word entheogen, which, as you might have figured out by now, I'm a fan of entheogens. So entheogen comes from the Greek language, and it literally means to generate the divine from within. And it basically means that it's a plant that induces a spiritual experience. So things like peyote or ayahuasca or even salvia, I mean, really, you can kind of ascribe that definition to even something like passion flower that has, mild psychoactive properties to it. But that's what an entheogen is. It's a plant that has some sort of interaction with the nervous system and is psychoactive to some degree. And so I just kind of made my own word up, entheozen, and voila, I didn't have to fight anyone for a trademark.
Yeah, and you got the domain nice and easy. It worked out.
Yeah, and you type that in, and like there's nothing but entheozen stuff showing up, except for maybe the occasional psychedelic forum where somebody made that as a username. But
Yeah, that's right. So where do you see your company or business going, or even yourself, within the next 2 years? I would ask 5 years, but again, we're in this fast-paced age that 2 is to 5. So let's go with 2. Where do you see it going in the next 2 years? Either yourself, are you going to be doing more speaking? I know you do work on trauma and a lot with people on these supplements. So would you even consider something down the road of actually having like retreats or something for these people where you can integrate these supplements, train these people, or educate, I suppose, these people on the value of these substances and how they can incorporate them in their lives?
yeah, a lot of those things are kind of on the radar. As far as a 2-year projection, definitely we are formulating new products for things that are really just kind of fundamental for brain and mood health. That's kind of our jam. Is like we just want people to feel happy and healthy. So we're planning on expanding our product line. One of the goals in the next year is that this can actually like pay me to sustain my life. I'm actually getting my first payment this month, July, that I've ever received from this business. I've had this business for 5.5 years. I've poured my blood, sweat, and tears into it. I've worked full-time for free and also worked other full-time jobs just to support myself while creating this business. So, that's first step is like, okay, maybe it's time to start getting paid and be able to pay my bills and not have a million other jobs. But I also see, Entheozen is not just about selling supplements. It's about a bigger mission of empowering people with information, with the resources, the tools, and the inspiration to take their health into their own hands and be proactive about improving their lives. And so I do want to start to move Entheogen into actually producing research that's surrounding the topic of mental health. I'm personally involved, well, I just started a couple of Cambo research projects, which I haven't talked a lot about yet because they're very in the beginning stages of things, but I'm going to be publishing some Cambo research in the next year, and I really would like to see Entheogen perhaps building like a nonprofit or some sort of research institution, even if it's small potatoes to start with, where we're actually funding and pioneering some really cutting edge research surrounding mental health or autoimmunity, because I feel like that is related to mental health in a lot of ways, or trauma resolution, or kind of anything surrounding that topic of just wellness. Using different nutrients, using different traditional medicines, things of that sort. So moving towards research for sure and pioneering that. And yeah, you mentioned retreats. To be honest, right now I'm a little burnt out on being personally invested in everyone's healing process. So I'm taking a little bit of time to step back and kind of do it from behind a computer screen, creating helpful YouTube videos, creating blog posts, creating stuff where I don't have to get sucked into their pain and their story as much, which is really draining. But when I'm feeling a little bit more recharged, I do want to host very comprehensive retreats where we provide a lot of different education and tools to people that they can take home with them and integrate into their normal life so that they can sustain their improvement after their retreat. So, that'd probably include Cambo and nutritional counseling, and maybe teaching them how to cook wholesome, healthy meals for themselves that are anti-inflammatory, or, are excluding ingredients that a lot of people have sensitivities to, and incorporating acupuncture and yoga and meditation, and really just helping them repattern how they relate to themselves, through their self-love and their self-care, and changing the way that they show up in their social relationships, including setting boundaries that will be conducive to having healthy relationships where they can honor themselves and others. So stuff like that, I think would be incorporated into a comprehensive retreat aimed at helping people really dig their way out of whatever hole that they've gotten stuck in and that they're sick and unhappy.
That's really good. Yeah, no, I kind of had a vision or got a vision of where you're going with that. It's really an all-encompassing approach to human optimization and just overall wellness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really
just a little bit of everything, and then you can gravitate towards what resonates with you, just getting a sampler of all these different modalities and tools that are accessible.
Very cool. Well, we're reaching about an hour, so I think we could wrap it up on that. I don't actually have any more questions for you this time, but again, I'll include all the links in the description below of this episode for anyone to have a look at your website and everywhere else. Did you have any closing thoughts, anything you wanted to leave anyone with? Normally, I even ask someone, I like to ask this, I know a lot of the listeners are in their 20s or in their early 20s. I like to ask sort of a piece of advice you would give someone in their 20s, either if it was someone that's interested in starting a supplement line, or if it was someone that's interested in just getting involved in a similar space that you're in. What route would they go down in terms of schooling or anything like that?
Yeah, well, I'm a rather unconventional person, and I haven't really moved through this process in any way that anyone else would probably ever recommend. Definitely having a science degree and background is helpful. It's not necessarily required, but yeah, I don't think I would have been able to force down the information that I got through my conventional schooling had I not been force-fed it. So having a science degree helps. That being said, you can teach yourself a lot by learning the language of science and then reading scientific literature. As far as becoming an entrepreneur and even in the supplement industry, I've done a lot of weird, unconventional stuff to get here. And really, I think the most important thing is to just never give up, to think outside of the box, and just don't ever tell yourself that you can't do it. You can always figure out a way to find money. You can always figure out a way to get past this obstacle. And really, you just have to be stubborn and persistent and never give up. And you got to kind of be a hustler and really be willing to explore ways of doing things that no one's ever done or that aren't standard practice. And, you know, because it's like a very competitive world in general. So you kind of have to be creative and have an edge if you want to survive and make it.
That's a solid piece of advice. And really congratulations on getting your first payment as well for your business. I did say that.
Thank you.
Pretty awesome. As someone that's had lots of businesses, I know that feeling. I've had businesses where like I'm just taking losses nonstop, and then like eventually they come out of that and it's like, yes, I knew it was going to get there. You know, it's like exactly what you're saying, just patience, perseverance, and just confidence in your own abilities and what you can execute. And you know, I think that's a really good takeaway. So thank you for taking the time to be on this episode and this podcast, and I really appreciate it. Again, I'll include all your links down below, so if anyone wants to reach out, I'm sure they can do so. Do you have any closing thoughts for anyone?
No, just, you know, that it was a pleasure to chat with you, and thanks everyone for listening, and feel free to reach out if you want to connect or have a question, or just check out the products and see if they resonate with you.
Very cool. Thanks again, Caitlin, and we'll talk again soon. See you.
Yeah, thank you.